I'm making this video as a sort of tabletop to illustrate what I said in my most recent live stream a little bit better with more visuals. When I was talking about this becoming a regional war, not World War III, but a regional war that ends up giving Babylon its horribly bloody nose, this configuration of what is Southwest Asia is definitely a massive trap for our forces. As you well understand, you have your Western forces, special ops, Germans, Brits, Americans, you've got your carrier groups, sailing in on the coast, and, you have the Israelis building up in their area there. You have Lebanon, which is full of Iranian proxy forces called the Hezbollah. And you've got Assad's Syria right here, Bashar al-Assad, who basically won his entire civil war. I mean, he's basically just mopping up pockets of resistance. I mean, yes, you have some Kurds up here, and you have some little tiny pockets of fighting in Idlib, and you've got American forces, curiously enough, out here in eastern Syria, clinging on to their little foothold in the oil-producing region of Syria. And you've also got U.S. forces in Iraq. And Kuwait, of course. You have them in Qatar, and you have them in Saudi as well, and also in Turkey. You got like Incirlik right there, the airbase, among others. So anyways, what I'm trying to illustrate here is that we're getting sucked into a very dangerous regional war that is going to end up giving us a proverbial bloody nose. As many aircraft as we lost in Vietnam, and this is going to be very reminiscent of that time. If this expands, like it most likely will, into a regional war. So, you have Egypt right here, you're having incidents where, you're hearing about issues at the border crossing, and, there's hostilities breaking out, albeit accidental, but yes, it doesn't take much but a careless spark to, turn a potential neutral country into a foe as well. But this is mainly to illustrate what would happen to our forces if we do try to go after Iran in this entire thing, because of course Iran is sending shipments of arms into Syria and into Lebanon to take care of their proxies, just like they arm their proxies, the Houthis down here, and their proxies in Iraq next door. They use Syria as a means to get in vital ammunition and weapon systems, the deluxe, everything. So you got Iran sitting here. And Iran, as I mentioned when I read all their stats on the live stream, they have a very, very adequate armed forces in order to defend themselves, but they're not going to be defending themselves alone, because if we try to attack them with sea-based missile strikes or sea-based airstrikes from carriers, China is here, and Russia is here too. China has about 50,000 troops, which is equivalent in size to roughly a group army. 2 years ago, Iran did bilateral agreements with both China and with Russia here, and in part of the clauses of the agreements, China was sending troops, the 50,000, to Iran with whatever they were bringing with them, and Russia as well, some Air Force assets and some technical specialists and other types of people. And no doubt they brought some very advanced electronic warfare systems along with them, and anything else typical of such sizes and compositions of forces, including their ISR capabilities, such as advanced types of radars, like the Chinese anti-stealth radars, which are in my community post by name and also mentioned in my stream. There's a miniaturized one that it's highly portable, and then there's a larger one with a little bit better range. But they're capable of detecting stealth aircraft, so that nullifies any advantages that the F-35 and the F-22 may have had, because they're easily detectable by these radars. And it should be known that Israel has an air force, in terms of total number of combat planes, roughly comparable actually to that of Iran. Actually, it's a little smaller in number of combat aircraft. Maybe not total aircraft, but I'm talking combat aircraft. They only have 3 types of combat aircraft. That's the F-15, the F-16, and the F-35. So they use these multi-role types of fighter slash strike aircraft, multi-role aircraft, to do ground strikes and to try to achieve air superiority. That's the whole composition of the Israeli combat air fleet. So Iran, they are chock full of weapons and capabilities and missile bases and installations inside their country, but they've also beefed up their proxies here, here, and here. And of course, for a non-state actor, Hezbollah is actually the biggest, most powerful non-state actor that actually exists in the world. It's as far as an army without a country. It's like not a nation's actual armed forces. It's actually a independent paramilitary force. So basically, you have a situation where you have, superpower China, moving in some of their vessels. That was actually a planned visit that actually was planned well in advance before all this stuff happened. They were doing, average port calls, just like most navies do. It's very common. China has a naval base actually down here in Djibouti. They have their forces in Iran. Their forces did do several deployments to the Syrian civil war to back up Assad. They sent the Night Tigers, which is one of China's elite special forces elements, to the Syrian civil conflict on 3 different deployments. But they're no longer permanently based there. But Russia is. Russia has naval and air assets in Syria. I believe Latakia and Tartus. So we're talking about a situation where China and Russia are absolutely not going to tolerate their allies being bullied, being Iran and Syria primarily. So you have a situation where Russia is absolutely not going to allow Syria to go down, and nor is China really, and both are definitely not going to allow Iran to go down. So a ground invasion is absolutely off the table. And for another thing, logistically, there is no way in hell we could actually invade a country the size of Iran in our current state. Actual affairs of logistics, because we're incredibly short on vital ammunition, including artillery shells, rocket artillery, anti-tank systems, man-portable air defense systems, all kinds of systems. And even now we're starting to piss away our ATACMs, giving them to Ukraine, and a lot of them are actually being shot down, and they're being proven ineffective. They haven't actually done a whole lot of damage. They destroyed 2 helicopters. The rest got shot down. So that was a flop. We've lost a lot of tanks. We've lost a lot of Bradleys. And it's not just us, it's the Western European NATO allies that sent all this equipment, ammunition, money, resources to that black hole in Europe. So Israel has suffered as a result. They're now very low on artillery shells. They're not completely out, but they're very low, and they're making some bellicose threats against Iran. So they're now saying they're going to hit the Iranian regime. And of course, again, China and Russia are absolutely not going to tolerate that. But, they have enough trouble in their own backyard that they really aren't going to be able to pull off much against Iran anyway, much less even Syria, because Syria and Iran are under Russian and Chinese protection. So the next best thing the U.S. would want to do in a situation like that is naval and airstrikes. And as I explained before, in a regional conflict, the Russians and Chinese wouldn't have to get directly involved because, we're not going in there on the ground trying to affect any kind of change. We're doing naval and airstrikes. So indirectly, China and Russia would offer their very powerful indirect support by offering their ISR strike capabilities to vastly improve Iranian and most likely Syrian forces to make their real-time battlefield intel a whole lot better so that their weapons can be a whole lot more accurate and on point and on target. And they can track all their targets. So I'm just doing this as like a sort of tabletop example of like what I'm talking about. So if you had a situation where issues, this becomes a major crisis, you have this situation where, you have the Southern Command of Israel, getting all these units from the other commands as well as Northern Command. I'm sure all the other commands like the Central Command and there's one other command. I'm sure they're dispersing all their units mostly to the north and to the southwest here around Gaza. So within Gaza, you would have basically these 40 to 50,000 Hamas and Islamic Jihad forces. And again, they have these underground tunnel systems. It would be a lot like Vietnam, except it would be, as far as the tunnel systems go. But then you would have all these blown out buildings, sort of like Stalingrad in World War II. And you would have all these armored vehicles getting, blocked by all the rubble piles. And it would be very slow going, and they would get, sucked into these choke points, and it would be extremely easy to hit with anti-tank weapons of all kinds. And, of course, you would have them doing airstrikes. You have this jet signifying Israeli air power going in there and, dropping munitions and trying to soften things up even more, I have these different units. I mean, I have like these signifying battalions, but I had to put like more ticks on them because, I can only fit so many in one area because, we're talking about divisions and brigades that would be setting up here to go in. And, you have naval, ships off the coast, Israeli, and then here's your two carrier groups. I'm just doing that to signify those, up here. Here's those couple Marine battalions, those 2,000 Marines. I would see them doing something, and the carrier-based aircraft doing something like, if a northern front opened up, you have them firing off many tens of thousands of rockets. They literally have enough rockets, 150 plus thousand rockets, for the rocket artillery pieces. They literally have enough to totally saturate pretty much the whole country if they want to. I'm talking about all of Israel. They have enough rockets to pretty much, saturate the country. But most likely they would be trying to target key military facilities like the electronic warfare facilities they've already destroyed two of up here in the north. They again, these are very well organized proxy forces and very well supplied by Iran and Syria, but mostly Iran. And, they're getting better and better weapons. And, of course, there's the Quds Force, which is part of the Paz-Daran, also known as the IRGC. They're up here, advising and most likely also manning certain, very high-end systems that were brought in, that the regular Hez guys can't operate. So, I would see in a situation in which these guys go ahead and go in, they're going to get bogged down horribly in here. Here's an American satellite for their ISR. Up here you got a Chi-Com satellite for their ISR to offer to the Iranians, Syrians, and whoever else. You would have these two Marines landing here to back, to take some of the heat off of Israel, because they're going to be under a lot of pressure sending all these forces in down here that we're going to get bogged down. And then if they open up another front in the north and start saturating the place with rockets, rockets are going to be landing everywhere. They're going to be hitting military installations, destroying aircraft, that are parked on runways, because they're going to target airports and air bases, and they're going to target, army installations and the whole nine, maybe even the nuclear reactor that Israel has. So, they're going to be hitting all kinds of key places with their massive salvos of rockets and missiles and artillery and mortars. The mortars would be more closer in, and the artillery, but the longer range stuff like the rockets and missiles would have different ranges that they could saturate certain areas. So the Marines would probably land here in Lebanon to try to flank these guys some kind of way, and while these guys would push north. But these guys are well dug in. They're well defended. They've been building defenses for years. In fact, their defenses were so good they essentially defeated Israel back in the 2006 war, because Israel ended up withdrawing. So here's your carrier-based aircraft. But here's what's going to happen. Because of the ISR capabilities, of China and Russia lent out to Iran and its allies, and some Iranian higher-end weaponry, alongside of, their proxies' weaponry, we're going to lose some planes. Not only are we going to lose some planes, but we're going to lose some ships. These guys have anti-ship missiles as well. They're going to be firing whatever they have at our carrier group off the coast. And that's not the only area. There's proxies still in Syria. Also, the state army of Syria, the Syrian Arab Army, which is Bashar al-Assad's regime forces, if they get sucked into it, because if they get attacked and, they declare a war and they get sucked into it, it's not just going to be them. There's probably going to be Iranian forces, like some of their Pasdaran elements, their IRGC forces and such, that have long been inside of Syria helping Assad's regime. And of course, Russia is in Syria. Again, they have bases there. So we're going to have to dance on a very fine line, not to, push too hard, or else, yes, it would expand the war, but I don't see it becoming larger than a regional war. But it'll be a regional war where we get a horribly bloody nose. We are going to lose pilots. We are going to lose sailors. We're going to lose aircraft and ships. This is going to be really bad. This is a really bad place to get trapped at. I'm talking about the Middle East as a whole. We have forces in Iraq. They're going to get targeted by militants with, kamikaze drones and mortars. Even when I was in Iraq, our installations got mortared a lot. I'm talking about different FOBs throughout the country, and even our combat outpost, that one of them that we were at, Imam Mansour, got mortared. They're going to be people doing, anti-tank mines and improvised devices and the whole nine. It's going to be crazy, and rockets and drones. And of course, they're going to be supplied by them. They're known for their kamikaze drones, and they're actually quite effective. And of course, you have the Houthis that would be, trying to fire at any ships that would happen to be passing by here in the Indian Ocean, coming out of the Red Sea into the Gulf of Aden here, and then up around Oman to try to get to the Strait of Hormuz. And here's where the Strait of Hormuz comes in. You got a situation here where you got Iran very easily able to block the straits. These are like pockets of Iranian and IRGC Navy, respectively, Navy, regular Navy and IRGC Navy ships, blocking the straits. Got a Russian satellite, you got a Chinese one, here's an American one, for the ISR. And of course, the Chinese and Russians are sending the real-time data back to their allies to make their forces far more effective. Here you have the 28th Mechanized Division, which is actually headquarters in Kerman, which is a city in Iran just to the north. I put them here because, of course, they're the nearest unit, and I have some of their battalions spread out just to protect their air defense and anti-ship batteries. These are the anti-ship batteries, and these are the air defense missiles. These are the ballistic missile bases. I just put some of them here, and these would have very long range. They could either fire out and try to hit our ships and sink them far away, like the closer anti-ship batteries and some of the ship-based anti-ship missiles, like the ones I have told you about, like the let's see here, I got them all wrote down. Basically like the copy of the KH-55, which is the Sumar, which Iran produces. This is a copy of the Russian KH-55, which has an incredibly long range of about 25,000 kilometers, which is about 1,554 miles. So imagine that going out away from the coast. That's so far away that if you were going to do airstrikes, you would have to use extra fuel tanks on all your fighter jets or strike aircraft just to make it to the Iranian coast from that far away, and only be able to do strikes in this area. But by the time they even got within, we're talking 80 miles, they're going to get picked up on radar, and these guys are going to start swatting them down. So they're really not even going to make it. And then you have Iranian aircraft based here, fighter elements, throughout the southern part of the country that could respond. But, Iran has so much air defense artillery, in terms of the missiles they have and air defense flak guns, but especially the missiles, not so much the guns you'd have to worry about. Those are more for low altitude. But for like the high flying, fighter jets and strike aircraft and strategic bombers, Iran has so much air defense, all these anti-ship missiles like the Sumar, the Hoveza and the Abu Mahdi and the Ra'ad, these all have different ranges. The longest range is the Sumar, the 1,554 mile sea skimming cruise missile, anti-ship missile. Then you have the Hoveza, which is 840 mile range, which is still incredibly long. And then you have the Abu Mahdi, 622 miles, and the Ra'ad is the 224 mile one. But you'd have all this stuff well layered. You would have anti-aircraft missiles protecting the anti-ship batteries, and vice versa. They would be clustered together. And of course, you'd have your, mechanized infantry forces on guard, and you'd have your missile bases on red alert. I put a Russian electronic warfare asset right here that would be generating a massive field to make it incredibly difficult for these aircraft to operate in a degraded environment. Same with this Chinese one right here. I put a Chinese one, over here. So, the whole entire region would be blanketed by electronic interference, electromagnetic weapons, directed at the aircraft to possibly make them, lose control and crash, or just degrade the environment to where they can't operate properly, like their weapons miss and, jams like their GPS and things like that. For the weapons and targeting. All of this stuff could easily happen. The IRSR stuff picking up for miles around, where all these ships are, many miles away, and relaying that targeting data back to these guys and the anti-ship batteries and the air defense weapons. So, they're going to be swatting aircraft down like crazy. Most of these guys won't even make it to do their mission and make it home. That's what I'm talking about. This is an example of the Strait of Hormuz, them just shutting it off, block it with a bunch of ships, all throughout it, to Western oil shipping. That would totally annihilate our economy here at home. It would devastate it. And, you go back to the larger map, and you see what I'm talking about with the Middle East just being a big ass trap. You've got all these choke points. You got the Suez. If they anger Egypt and Egypt shuts off the Suez because they're getting into BRICS Plus anyways. They're China and Russia have a lot of investment in Egypt right now, and Egypt's always tilted, toward Russia, and also even now to China. So, Egypt's very friendly with them, and if Egypt closed the canal, there's one choke point, and you have to go through the Red Sea, you'd have to go through the Gulf, how are we going to supply our forces that are in Iraq? If Iran shuts off the straits, and, the Suez gets shut off by Egypt, and all of this stuff in here becomes a quagmire, and Israel just gets bogged down, and it turns into Ukraine, and all its cities are gutted from all the rocket fire and, all the different artillery and, all the maniacs coming in and, car munitions and blasting, all the whole nine, if this becomes a quagmire and they get into their little Vietnam down in here in Gaza and get stuck, and stuff breaks out in the West Bank because of all the hell breaking loose here and here, it's going to be a quagmire. And if these Marines land and the defenses are so good here in Lebanon that they get their asses whooped. We have our woke Marines go in and they get their asses kicked, and something horrible happens where a bunch of them get taken POW. I mean, can you imagine that? Can you imagine a crisis like that where we sail away in defeat, we lose a whole bunch of people? I mean, that's like a nightmare scenario. And I want people to understand that what's going on right now, we're being drugged into it by some very evil people. Some very wicked, evil people are dragging us into this situation, and we absolutely do not need to be in this right now. Absolutely not. This is very, very dangerous. I mean, even if it stays a regional war, which I believe it will, it's still extremely dangerous in the sense that, we're going to get such a nasty blow to our military. I mean, it's gonna hurt us economically. It's going to hurt us with our morale at home because of our military getting crushed, getting stuck in places like, the eastern Syria, Iraq. I mean, can't get out. The king of Saudi not lifting a finger to help us and making it hard to operate out of those bases. I mean, because he's friendly with Iran. They had a rapprochement because of China, and he's also friendly with Russia. I mean, and Turkey is really leaning towards them too. I mean, really, this has a propensity to be a complete, utter catastrophe on the scale of Ukraine, or maybe even a little bit worse. Because that's just another regional war going on right here. That's just another regional war. And Russia's stomping ass and taking names. That video I shared, on my community, Ukraine is trying to throw every last bit they have at Russia that they've got left. I mean, it's like their last gasps, like their death throes or something. I mean, because now we have to send shells to resupply them, because earlier we had taken shells from them, artillery shells, and sent it to them. And now we have to send them more shells because we already sent them those shells that we took from them, So they're getting very low on artillery, and they're making bellicose threats to Iran, who's protected by Russia and China. And Syria as well is also under their protection. I mean, this is a nightmare for us. This has a lot of terrible ramifications. I mean, I don't have to tell anybody that, but I'm just showing as a sort of tabletop type of deal, what I'm talking about. I'm illustrating it with visuals, exactly what I'm talking about. When I explained this in my last stream, I mean, Iran has, so many different types of air defense systems. I mean, they have all the old Hawk systems we gave them, but they modified them. They have 200 of those. They have another 52 K-12 Cubs. They have Mersad, which is something they've made. They got 400 of those. They got 30 Kamin 2s, and they got the Khordad 3s. They got 440 of those. They got the Sayyad 1, 400 of those. These are all air defense missile systems. They've got the Khordad 15. They got 150 of those. They got 4 S-300s. they got 400 Gare. Yeah, I think that's how you pronounce it. And these are all medium to very long range, and then they have their new Bavar, the Bavar 373, which has incredible range for air defense. It's 300 kilometer range and 30 kilometer altitude. The stealth bomber that we have, the B-2, I believe, its maximum flight ceiling is something like 16 or 17 kilometers above the earth, and all these air defense systems go well in excess of that. And allegedly, the Bavar has some stealth tracking tech in it, but you have to be within a certain range for the calibrations to pick up stealth aircraft. I think it's like within 85 kilometers, so they have to get in close enough for them to be picked up. But no, with China's radars there, they don't have to worry about that. China's ISR capabilities, their radars, their drones, their satellites, it'll feed it all back to them. Same with Russia. They'll help Iran defend themselves, and it'll be even more of a catastrophe than if we were just fighting Iran on their own. This ain't the Iran from the 80s, 90s, or even the early 2000s. This is a much more, revitalized, much stronger Iran. So, and they have very, very, very powerful allies. So I just thought I would show people, what I'm trying to talk about. This has so much just potential to end up drastically horrible. I mean, even where they get defeated and they have to give up or sign some kind of armistice or surrender, because even fighting them with Iran's help and our little bit of help we can give. I mean, if Iran is pulled into it, we're pulled into it against Iran. All bets are off. They're in even deeper trouble then because again, all bets are off. Iran will send their fullest support to these guys. Nothing's going to hold it back. And even if these guys just go ahead and strike preemptively with all those rockets, they're going to saturate all these installations. This is not a big country. They can hit all the installations in this country with all those rockets they have. They have so much rocket artillery, and they have, missiles, and, they have anti-ship missiles. They have some air defense, but it's mostly rocket artillery that they have, and they have a lot of it. So if, a few thousand Marines try to land on the beaches and, take, fortified areas in Lebanon along with them going up. I mean, I'm just thinking the way that I would think they would do it. I'm just thinking, it's like a thought exercise, if you will. It's like a thought exercise. While these guys are all bogged down here, and these guys launch, massive salvos. These guys, land here and go up with them while everything's getting, smashed. Most of their Air Force gets destroyed on the ground because all the runways are hit, airports, air bases, Army installations. I mean, the whole gamut of different things. Cities, everything. So, this place is going to be wrecked. I mean, if they launch a full, rocket and missile attack, this place is going to be wrecked. I mean, this is not a big country. It wouldn't take much. So they have enough to do it. And if Syria and Iran completely jump in with Russia and China protecting them, it's going to turn into a regional war disaster. I mean, a total disaster. I mean, we're going to lose ships. We're going to lose, because the range of these missiles, you have to understand, not just the air defense, but these anti-ship missiles, they're even on some of the vessels too. So if the ships come out a little bit from the coast, that pushes the range out even further. And then you've got the Houthis that would likely have some in Yemen too that can help out and flank from this side as they're firing. I'm just saying, this is like a death trap. This is a giant death trap right here. That's what this is. This whole thing's a death trap. Just the geographical layout of it, the types of enemies you would face, the deficiencies in their artillery stocks and their weapons in general. Israel is not as powerful as people think. They have limitations. They have severe limitations to their power. They could potentially be, for all intents and purposes, wiped off the map. Maybe not in the complete literal sense, but beyond proverbially speaking. There would be a lot of craters there. Let me just put it that way. They would be in a lot of trouble. I'll just say that. They'd be in a lot of trouble with or without our help, and our help would be very limited. We would lose ships in the Mediterranean, and we would lose ships definitely out here. And it's not like, Iran or Syria wouldn't have missiles here that they could fire at our ships either, or that, and do it clandestinely using Hezbollah militants in Syria to do it, because again, they helped Assad in his civil war, so there's still a bunch still in Syria where they could have plausible deniability. This whole thing's a mess. Our installations in Iraq get attacked by militants, and the Houthis do their thing. This is a nightmare. This is a nightmare from hell. This whole situation. Middle East is a trap. It's a death trap. All that oil cut off, from the straits being shut, or even an oil embargo being put on us by the Arab nations. This is stuff people have to think about. This is what's going to cause the collapse of Mystery Babylon at home due to the oil issues, and it's going to cause the multi-way Syrian style, our very own here at home. And, after that, we get invaded. So that's all I really had to say about this. So, if you just look at the map, it's a disaster. This most likely won't happen, but let's say it got bigger than a regional war. Let me explain something. Russia right here has their stuff in Syria. Of course, you'd have Syria and all their forces. You'd have Iran and all their military power, along with all their proxies. China, because they have forces in Djibouti, they have forces in Iran. It's ooh, man. I mean, they have hypersonic weapons. I'm talking about them and China. I mean, I mean, we would lose even more than we would just lose from them, from them and their proxies. I mean, we would lose even more if we had to fight them and China. I mean, like directly, beyond just like indirect support of Iran. I mean, like we fought them directly. I mean, it'd be catastrophic. And they're going to invade us anyway, after we have our internal conflict here at home, Babylon. So, I hope that helped put it all into perspective with visuals. It's like a sort of tabletop type deal, so, yeah. I couldn't show our ships because they would be, due to the range of all these missiles, they'd be wanting to stay way, way away from the coast. Like I said, they'd have to use extra fuel tanks just to make it barely to the coast and back, and like to do like one quick strike and go back. And they wouldn't even make it. I mean, these air defense systems would be swatting them down left and right. We'd lose so many aircraft, it would get pretty close to what we lost in Vietnam. Maybe even, if it was a long enough issue, if we kept trying to like send more, we might even lose as much as we lost in Vietnam. I mean, I'm talking about the rate of loss. So, I mean, yeah, this would be bad. I mean, we would lose ships too, no doubt about it. All right. So y'all have a blessed day.